Great. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Erin Maney. I am the Manager of Community Engagement for Open SUNY. And in partnership with SUNY OER Services, I want to welcome you to today's Open Education Week Showcase webinar. On each of 4 days this week, we have presenters who are sharing what they're doing on their campus around this theme of openness. So we hope that you will join us for all or any of the sessions you can attend and learn from each other and support your peers. And just as a point of logistics, I'd ask that you keep your mics muted until the Q&A at the end. Video, of course, is optional. It is being recorded, so that's up to you if you'd like to be on video or not. And before I introduce our speaker today, I want to encourage you to leave us your name and email address. We have a little sign-up sheet here that I'll post in the chat window. This is our way of recognizing your engagement today in this community of practice activity. So we can use this to communicate with you and send you additional materials after the session. So Ken, I'll have you forward the slide for me. Thanks. And so today we are pleased to host Dr. Kenneth Podolak from the State University of New York at Plattsburgh. Ken is an associate professor of physics and will be highlighting resources from an OpenStax physics textbook and discuss his role as a content lead developer for OpenStax. So on behalf of the Open SUNY team, Ken, I thank you for joining us today and sharing what you've done there.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess I'll take over. Welcome, everybody. I'm up here in the northeast corner of New York, and excited to talk to you guys a little bit about open education resources, more specifically what I did for OpenStax. And I wanted to briefly go over just a few ideas about why open education resources should be considered, not too lengthy, hopefully, into that zone. And then I will go into how does OpenStax operate. It's just basic structure, website, and all the structure from that company. And then finally, I'll go into more specifically what I fell in love with and how I got engaged as a content lead author for OpenStax and what went into this process to hopefully give everybody a comfort factor as far as how these things are developed. And so if you're interested in looking at those, you'll know basically the structure, how it goes. Even though I'm from physics, you may not be in the physics discipline. Hopefully some of this stuff crosses along a lot of lines. So the first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is textbooks in the market. Basically, if you think about textbooks and some of the major publishing companies, you may have representatives visiting you potentially from some of these companies. And you might realize that if you think about it, that there are not many publishers out there for a lot of your textbooks that you get for your courses. And actually, what I've found in some student public interest group report, that there are only really 5 major publishers that control 80% of the market. And if you think about just raw competition, this basically prohibits competition amongst others to kind of present new and innovative ways of bringing stuff out in textbooks. Also, if you think about a normal market where you get rewards for price and quality, they're really the student, as far as their perspective, has no choice in the matter if you think about it, because the professor looks through, usually, or the instructor looks through for which book they think best fits their content. They choose that, and the student is more or less locked into that book, regardless of price or what their learning style is. They just have to go with that professor on that book. And that, isn't always the best choice for the student, yet they have to kind of figure themselves out through it. So that's where the market is right now, I believe, although currently OER sources are coming up to speed. And I wanted to show this slide also that came out from the Florida Virtual Campus. And I thought this was a very interesting slide because when looking at a study about students and their successes at a virtual campus, so you're thinking about using lots of online resources, 66%, if you look at the far right-hand side, said that they did not purchase the required textbook for the course. And, to me, that was very shocking when I saw that. I was just like, my gosh, 2/3 of the students are not even buying the book. And, students are saying they take fewer courses. They blame that they drop a course, withdraw from a course because they didn't have a good impact with the textbook or they don't have it, earning poor grades. So all this are just very concerning statistics, I think, when I was looking at this and thinking about, well, what can we do differently? You know, if students aren't buying the book, college tuition's rising. It's very expensive to go to college for some students. How can we make sure that there's affordability in this factor for students? And one of the things is looking at the textbook and seeing if we can find alternative ways of learning the content without having to pay an arm and a leg for the book. So that leads me into the next thing, which is just a little bit about open education resources. And OER basically provides faculty with a lot more choices, and this is just the generic OER. I'll go into OpenStax specifically as a choice of OER. And in OER, you're allowed to basically freely edit and adapt the book as you want. It's not something that you're locked into the book as is. If you want to select certain chapters, certain sections, you can do that. Or you can even write in different pieces in your own custom style book. And you're not locked into a particular platform system. Some books have agreements with homework or web-based platforms. Not an OER. You have choice amongst what you want to use. If you want to go out on the web and do something, you can do that with OER sources. And then stating that basically that these should be just homegrown. They're not legislated or mandated things, and they should stand on their own for sources. So. One thing that comes up when people talk to me about this stuff is, if it's free, how could they get any money to do what they're doing? Well, there's a lot of foundations and support. Rice University hosts OpenStax, and they have contributed toward this endeavor. However, there's other granting and funding agencies that they've applied for money to help keep themselves running, like the Hewitt Foundation and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the 20 Million Minds. These are just some of the foundations that they've received substantial grant money to keep themselves going and provide the resources that you'll find available at OpenStax. So. And I also wanted to illustrate, and this is just a sampling here of the amount of colleges that have partnerships or agreements with OpenStax. And you'll notice here SUNY at the bottom corner over here. I've made sure to trim them out, make sure that's pointed out. But everything from community colleges to big universities all over the US are all have partnerships, agreements to use things related to OpenStax. And so, again, this is just a sampling. I've left some out that are, using it currently. I apologize if people know of these, but just to, that it's not just something that is just a few people doing off in the corner. It is spread around and it's growing rapidly. So. One thing I wanted to bring up as well is that these things are, like I said, 100% free. In the top right corner, I give you the link of openstax.org/subjects. I'm just looking at the science-related subjects here. However, there are subjects all across humanities and whatnot. Basically, when OpenStax came up with their model, they tried to look at what books are very expensive that are well subscribed across all college campuses. And so in the sciences, they started with these books. Your introductory chemistry, your biology, your physics courses. There's not a lot available here for advanced courses. So if you're thinking of things at the the upper levels, there isn't that many books available currently. There's interest in growing into that market, but as far as what they've tried to focus on in the initial stages are the very large introductory courses that you would see at a lot of colleges. And you can imagine maybe your own college, some of these books that come out, and you can feel free to look through the selection yourself, like I said, because I'm going to focus on the science side, but there's a lot of availability of the stuff. So please do just go check them out if you have some time and just look through the subjects. It's free to look, so go ahead and check it out at some point. Now, one thing that they rely on for their funding is adoptions, and adoption is free. What they do is they use your adoption to help them justify their funding. And so really, if you're using their book, they want you to basically tell them that we are adopting an OpenStax book for our course. And they just want to use the university's name as far as the funding goes. And I think that makes sense. You know, it's a nice way to get back to them and just tell them, yes, we are using your resource. So that's how they recommend for the physics book how to get it. But openstax.org, you can also go in and make sure you email them and tell them that you're using your book if you do choose to use it. And actually, when I started out, I was not using their book exclusively. I was using it as a secondary source. And that's fine as well. You don't have to immediately adopt it right away. If you want to start and play with it, provide as a secondary course material, that's fine too. On the right here, I just show you a little bit of what their college physics book is about. And I wanted to point out here that on the bottom right is that the web view and the PDF are all free. If you want to go on there, you can look through the web view. I prefer the web view because the PDF is sometimes very lengthy, cumbersome to go through it. But if you want to download a PDF and save it on your computer, you can do that for free right now for any of their books, completely free. Now, if you want something on the iBook or print copies, these are some prices that I pulled from them. I think this was 2 years ago. Some people ask questions like, you know, can I actually get a printed copy of this open source adopted textbook like OpenStax? And the answer is yes, you can. There is a fee for the printing. It's a nice bound book. You can get that made. You can coordinate with your bookstores and your librarians maybe about how you can get that done with OpenStax. However, I wanted to cite that there is the print option. So I know some people have funding, students will have funding to go to college, and part of that funding is money to buy books. So yes, the student can use that money to buy a printed copy, and you can provide that option at the bookstores as well, is that there's a printed copy available. You may go off and buy that. If you just want the free web version or the PDF, you can use that too. It's really up to you of how you want to use it. So, and like I said, there's the Creative Commons license here that you can revise, reuse, remix, redistribute. Goes into all that kind of good information. So, all right. So this is what it looks like. I just wanted to show you an open page, you know, off the website. What it looks like when you go in there. It's got nice splashy cover here. And you can go in and look at anything from student resources, the errata, the table of contents, the senior authors here. You can click on going down and find out about more of the authors. Spectrum of authors from everything from community college to any sort of large university have all worked on these books. So this is a trim out of contents. Again, you may not be into physics, but what I wanted to share with you is that content is taken seriously in OpenStax. And when books come out, they look at these major publishing companies' books. And when the writing styles start to begin, they try to come up with a standardized way of going through these topics. They don't want to look very different, and they want to appear to be basically going through the same motions that you have gone through with your other courses. So if you go through the topics like I did with physics, I matched this up with my own textbook, and I was like, wow, this is basically every topic in the order I cover it. This is great, you know? Doesn't mean that there are different ways to approach things, of course, and you can change things around if you want to, but I was impressed that, you know, I came up with them is that, oh yes, they do go through things, they do check out the books, and they make sure that it is going in a structure that hopefully you're familiar with. So here's a sampling of what I wanted to show you of a textbook that what it looks like online, and this is a physics textbook. And so it's splashy. You know, on the left-hand side, you have your units and your chapters. You can click on any one of those and go into it. Now, I like the online version because it's easier to navigate, I think, because if you want to go between sections, you can quickly, clickable links, nice pictures that you'd see at the front of every chapter. You know, it has the feel of a real textbook because it is a real textbook. It's just online. And you can go through any of the sections if you want to see chapter reviews, as well as look up a constant or something like that. You know, clicking around is very smooth and easy, and I use that a lot going through it that way. So, Uh, some people ask about additional resources for the book, and this is a growing market. Actually, I'm going to a conference for OpenStax in April for more development of these sort of additional resources, because one of the things that a lot of current textbook publishing companies put out are just a lot of splashy resources. They come up with video analysis and homework tools and whatnot. And this is a growing market for OpenStax, I find. And I'll show you some of these coming up in a few slides here. But they do have availability of online homeworks, online labs, online practice, some PowerPoint slides, like the graphics that you see in the textbook. They provide the PowerPoint slides with those cool graphics. Pronunciation guidelines, solution manuals, and test banks. So it is a growing thing, but it has a lot of available resources. And what it looks like is kind of like this. So, and you'll notice that on this page here, you got all the little lockbox things here, the padlocks on some of these things. What happens is that students are locked out of some of these things, and what they need to do basically is you verify your instructor account to get access to some of the solution manuals and whatnot. And that's a smart thing to do, I think, because if you think about it, you don't want your solution manuals leaked out online and at every resource so that they can go on to Yahoo, Google, and just try to find your answers. You know, so some of the stuff is locked down, kept private, and you can go through the PowerPoint slides and whatnot. There's some even concept trailers, some really cool little videos they have. You can access and see if that fits your resource. Again, this is in physics. There may be different selections in other departments, but I'll just talk about this end because that's where I developed in. And the add-ons, again, these are just 3. I'm not saying that you have to use these 3 or that whatever. I mean, I used WebAssign in the past, and then it was great to see, oh, they're still using WebAssign, Top Hat, Lumen. There's more selection here than I wanted to publish on this PowerPoint. But if you're using an online platform, homework website, or whatever, check it out. Maybe OpenStax is already integrated with it. And with the integration of homework websites with OpenStax, that means that they have all the problem sets integrated in there, and you can just select the problems you need, and you can put the online web homework if that's something that is interesting to you. So, okay, so now I wanted to get a little bit into the insider's guide, you know, between us, right, over the web. So I want to tell you a little bit about the development, because all of what I've shown you so far is just, you can find this online, right? You can go on, you can look at it in OpenStax, but so what happened is roughly 3 years ago, I saw an ad that said, you know, would you be interested in developing the new university physics textbook? And the college physics textbook, which is algebra-based, has already been very successful. And I was intrigued as a young faculty member, wanting to get in on the market and develop a textbook was a great opportunity. And what I wanted to share with you a little bit is that they care about the content, as I mentioned, but they also have what's called a competitive analysis. What they do is they go through all the major textbooks, and they literally tell you, comparing, let's say, 4 leaders, if you will, the number of examples in each textbook, the number of figures, the number of problems, and they try to match as well as they can to the textbook chapters they write to what the others are doing, because they don't want to feel like that you are shortchanging something because you're going into an open source textbook. So I would get one of these competitive analyses. As a developer, I'd read through this thing, and then in developing each chapter section, I'd have to consider this stuff. Like, well, these major publishers are putting this many figures in here, this many problems. I should do something similar and make sure that it looks and feels like one of these other books. And one thing to mention also is the peer review process. It truly is a peer review process with OpenStax. It's not something that I just wrote the chapter, zoomed it out there, and they put it up online. It doesn't go like that. The first copy, basically, I write is approved by a local editor, I call them. And it is peer reviewed twice. Once the editor and I agree that this is a good chapter based on competitive analysis, it goes out for peer review 2 different intervals, of which we have at least 3 different people from other colleges and universities reviewing my chapter. Now, sometimes their reviews are easy. They're just like, oh, I recommend you change the sentence around and okay, it sounds good to me. I think that's a good idea. Sometimes they're really controversial decisions. Things that if it changed the chapter, it would change the scope of everything. And then that's when I had to have a serious conversation with my editor and just talk to them and say, like, okay, look, I understand this is where this reviewer is coming from. This is where I'm coming from, and this is where the competition is. So I think sometimes that maybe we should steer it this way. Or maybe, okay, yes, we'll go with what the reviewer states. It varies, but there's serious discussions on this stuff, at least 2 different rounds. And there's also a lead editor that basically is compiling this stuff. I was a part of 10 different chapters of roughly 40 chapters in my book that was published. But the lead editor puts it all together. They encourage the one voice because I'm only doing 10 of the chapters. Others are doing it on their own. The lead editor is trying to make sure that basically it sounds like one person is writing this thing. It is not 10 different people across different places, let's say, all writing it. The one voice thing is very important. It is taken seriously in the development of the textbook. In the review process, in case people are curious, there's a rubric that they developed, and people not only write comments on each section, we are graded A through E, E being failing, A being the best, by each reviewer, and comments are submitted. Now, this is just some of the rubric. The rubric actually is very extensive. It goes everywhere from content, writing style, appropriate engaging, chapter components in the organization, and the end of section exercises and summary. Are they appropriate? Does it sound like what they're doing? And again, some people use books that are very different than the standard of what is going on as far as the major publishers. Those ones are the hardest to satisfy because those people out there are using things that are very innovative, very different. And so there's got to be a lot of serious discussions going on as far as how this stuff goes. And again, this is just some of the rubric. I didn't want to put the whole thing out there, show you things, grades I had on different sections and whatnot. But I wanted to give you a flavor of just like, this is how it's taken seriously. And when one of these reviews comes back, it is a true rubric, and I have to make sure I verify how I wrote and what's going on. And I think that's very important. It shows the structure of the process is smooth. So this one here, I want to talk a little bit about, there's updated text and examples. When we went through the textbook, sometimes we found outdated references, and maybe you're familiar in your own field. I found things like cassette tapes, and it's like, what does an 18 to 22-year-old know about cassette tapes nowadays? So, updating them to modern examples using modern devices like magnetic resonance imaging, let's say, for physics, and staying away from the outdated examples that students have no real practical feeling on anymore. And another thing I wanted to bring up are example problems. There's a structure to them. It's important in physics, maybe in your own discipline, to show them how to solve and develop things. And some textbooks, I think, go through just problem solution. And I think that really shortchanges things, especially as students try to develop a problem-solving style. And so I really liked how when they went through an example, and I'll show you in a slide or two, there's a strategy section where basically there's a discussion almost in the problem of, this is how we think about developing a problem. Very good. And also there's a significance section as well where it kind of wraps things up and just like, well, why do we want to solve a problem like this? Where's there applications for it? And lastly, I check your understanding to show that basically after you solve the whole problem that you can go back through and you can still do those kind of things that you were doing in the previous example. Also in the textbook, all the standard stuff, learning objectives, they're very big right now. They've developed learning objectives for each chapter section. You can go through and see that those, if they match well to your syllabus, and so you can see the style of how we wrote them, key terms, equations, summaries, all that stuff's included in the textbook. And one of the big things I wanted to point out, a competitive amount of conceptual questions and problems. And this was one of my pet peeve sometimes, because sometimes it was very easy to come up with questions, and like some chapters, okay, I got this, and you're just writing chapter questions, and you're feeling really good, and sometimes it's just like, okay, I got through what I wanted, and then you look back at the competitive analysis and you're like, oh man, there's more. Like the other companies are putting out much more problems in this section, and I think I've seen some other up and coming books that really didn't do enough with problems and conceptual questions. And I feel like OpenStax really tried to aim for, there's a large amount of problems that students can try to solve, so professors have the obligation, instructors, to pick which problems and questions they want to use. This is just an example question from a text. Again, you may not be in physics, but it just shows you the outline of what you would see in the printed textbook. Clickable links to equations, I think, is very nice, in case students wanted to like go back into the reading and say like, oh, where's this? And they can go back in. It's like, oh, okay, I can find that. That's cool. Strategy, solution, significance, like I talked about, and a check your understanding at the bottom here to make sure that students are still working well. And oftentimes, these check your understandings will have a short clickable link at the bottom, and when you click on that, it may provide a brief answer for you, which is really good. So you can see like, okay, yes, I'm getting it. I can see what's going on here, which is really good. So. One thing I didn't mention, which I want to show up in this textbook, this is a famous schematic for the Rayhead rule in physics. They had an artist, a computer artist team, a team that basically are graphic design, I guess you'd call them, and which is great because as I design things, graphs, figures, they have a team to basically design these things. They look slick and they're very clear, I think, and also it takes the pressure off me, because as a new developer, I don't have a lot of the skills, honestly, to develop the graphics at the level that they have. But I can sketch things out on paper, pencil, or just show them a quick sketch, and they can make my design look beautiful on a textbook. So, so I wanted to show you that. As well as at the bottom, I wanted to show you a little bit that it's interactive. There's a websites that sometimes they'll have you click on the computer form that you can go to and do some more practice problems. So I thought that was great. They can click on this and they can go into their in the problem. So just last few concluding thoughts, and then I'll answer any questions. You know, I wanted to mention that basically I wanted you to think about how could you use an open education resource for the course that you might teach. You know, does OpenStax offer this thing? And I dare to compare, you know, look at OpenStax book, look at your current textbook, and just sit down with it and think about it. Maybe if you're busy now, not so much, maybe in the summertime or winter term if you have time, to just look at your books and think about it. Is OpenStax really that much different than what you're currently using? Maybe, maybe not. And then one thing which I've heard is in 2017, New York State and Cuomo has invested $8 million to spread the development and use of open education resources like OpenStax. Different campuses have different ways that they might be using this money or trying to encourage development of it. I've seen different models, but there's been money attached to this thing. And so it's not just a sort of a, well, I'll just change the book because this is neat and innovative, but there's money attached to helping students out. So I encourage everybody to kind of investigate on their own campus of how they're basically maybe getting a slice of this pie, and what you can maybe do for your campus as far as open education resources. So, and that's me.
Thank you, Ken. Terrific. Lots of great information for folks to be considering. I do have a question in the chat for you. I have two questions, actually.
Good try.
So Vince is asking if you might know what are the plans to expand on the OpenStax platform and make it easier to find OER if something may be in the works, or is there a timeline for its launch? I don't know if you know that answer or have any insight into that.
Well, you know, easier to find OER, I'm not really sure. As far as, you know, stuff like this obviously is great to expand, and I know that faculty at Plattsburgh State and librarians have been very open about trying to talk to faculty and their faculty senate and whatnot about the opportunities there are for open source stuff. As far as the plans to expand, OpenStax is constantly expanding. Like I said earlier, I'm going to a conference in April about trying to expand the textbook options as far as additional resources and more books. They're always open to ideas in OpenStax as to where the next place is. They're constantly growing ever since they started. So yeah, so that's something that I think that they're on the uptick. I think that they're up now. I saw stat like 10%. I think is the market right now, and it's been growing every year. So.
Thank you. Another question about the co-authors. How did you find co-authors to write the chapters, or was that something they kind of matched you up with?
Right. So what happened is that OpenStax had their editor, and it was an interview process. So I wasn't part of the finding the co-authors. OpenStax, the company, put out a call. I put in my resume, and then they did an interview process. So I had to basically have a phone interview with them, not on site, just a phone interview where I discussed my ambitions, my abilities, what I wanted to get out of designing a textbook, and so then they found their different people to co-author textbooks. And one thing I guess I can mention is that it's not very simple to author a chapter in an OpenStax textbook. I think some people actually dropped out initially agreeing to it because it is an intensive endeavor to author a chapter for a textbook. There's the revisions and the process, and some people, I believe, and this is what I've heard, didn't know how much it really takes to really put in all that effort. So, but it was all based on them finding me as a call, and I applied to be one of their authors. So.
Great, thank you. And then last question that I'm seeing so far, back a little ways, you mentioned 3 different add-ons, Top Hat, WebAssign, and Lumen.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly explain what those are for any folks who don't know?
Okay, so those platforms could be anything from online web-based homeworks. So like WebAssign has online homework, so if you wanted to use that option, it's a paid service, by the way. So all these ones, Top Hat, Lumen, and WebAssign, these are not free services, but they attach with the open source textbook. So I know that for some people that might be teaching large courses that need an online version of homework or whatnot because they feel like that's a good system for them, they can coordinate with that. The other ones maybe are course management systems. You might use like a Blackboard or Moodle site. Some of these other resources have online platforms where basically they can structure the course with them. There may be fees for them, but again, I'm not familiar. I guess somebody said Lumen is essentially free for SUNY. So some of them may cost money. I can't say that they all are free, but Lumen, I guess, has a contract with SUNY, so that's cool to know. So anyway, and yeah, I guess someone else knows about Top Hat actually moving to an open pay structure for OER. So yeah. Okay. So
Great.
anyway,
It's always good when others can chime in there. That's awesome.
Right. That's great. Yeah. So yeah, as a faculty member in the design process, I have a narrow window, but also it opens you to the ideas of what it was like. So anyway.
Sure. Well, thank you again. And in the interest of time, I'll do our closing slides here. So I just want to thank not only Ken, but all of you for joining us today. This session was recorded. I posted that link in the chat there for you. That's uploaded, within 24 hours or so. If you haven't had a chance to sign in, I would encourage you to do that. It just helps us have a way to reach out and connect with you. And go ahead to the next slide. We'll take a look at tomorrow. Our next Open Education Week webinar will feature Carol Beckley and her colleagues, Leah Galka and Megan Pereira, all from Buffalo State College, sharing about how they are using Creative Commons license, the actual license itself, directly on items within the Blackboard learning management system. And Carol's going to give a little bit of a demo on that, and Leah is a librarian and Megan is an instructional designer, and so they were her support in getting that done, and they'll talk about that process. This session will take place tomorrow, Thursday, March 8th at noon. Again, you can join tomorrow's session using the same link that you used today, and you can also find more information on our promotional website there, so I'll paste that little link there for you in the chat. It also notes Friday's session too, if you'd want to take a look at that. So thank you again for joining us. We do hope to see you at another open education event this week.
Yep, thank you.